Well, welcome to part 2 of my gemstone drawing tutorial. So in part 1 we laid down the first layer of colored pencil, which basically delineated the various shapes within the gemstone. And now I'm going about darkening and blending the colors to give it a really rich texture. One of the biggest things I see artists, especially beginner artists, doing, and something I still am, but much less so, and definitely was guilty of in the past, is not putting enough color in their drawings. It's very easy to be afraid of color because once you kind of put it in there, it's harder to get rid of. So it's always easier to put less right from the start. One of the biggest things that I struggled with was desaturating orange animals. So I did a big floofy orange cat commission, and the commission turned out really well, and I was really happy with it. But I made him almost cream colored rather than the true orange that he was. So don't be afraid to put color. That's what is going to bring your drawing to life. And the other thing to be aware of is don't be afraid to go dark. You want your highlights to be light and your darks to be really, really dark. And one tip I saw online the other day was take a picture of your art, turn up the contrast on your phone or on your computer, and play around with what you would like your contrast to look like, because oftentimes, again, it's less risky to put less contrast in. So we tend to do that until we get confident enough to say, yeah, I'm going to go really, really dark. So you can see here in the darker parts of the gems, I'm putting in a lot of dark browns and some dark reds and occasionally some oranges. The interesting thing about gemstones is that they tend to be mostly a dark color with some highlights of those lighter colors. So even though as a whole our eye perceives a gemstone as being sort of one color, they're absolutely not. There's so many different colors in every gemstone, and that's part of what makes them a challenge, but also part of what makes them really rewarding to draw. So when I'm drawing any kind of drawing in colored pencil, and when I'm darkening the layers like I am here, the first thing I do is I always go over every section with the lightest sort of common color. And in a gemstone drawing, those sections are very, very small. So each little facet would be its own section. But for example, here I'm coming in with an orange pencil and I'm pressing down quite hard. That's what I call the lightest color, the base color of that section. And then I'm going to, follow up with some browns and some reds and start layering within that. My personal preference for a colored pencil drawing, I don't like to have any of the paper showing through. I know there's some artists who prefer that style, and that's totally fine, but for me, I don't like any of the tooth of the paper showing through. So I do what is called burnishing, where I take, again, the lightest sort of shade and really push down, get a nice solid base, and over top of that I will layer other colors. That's a bright yellow and a very light orange that I'm using to do that on the lighter facets, and then the brown is coming in there as the shading to sort of differentiate between them. I will make a list of all the colors I used for this drawing. That will be in the third video, so don't worry if you're not following along on exactly what colors I've been using. But I find it's really helpful to sort of start to think about what the lightest color is in every section of a drawing. When I'm doing fur, it's often, a cream or a light brown. In here, it's mostly browns and oranges and a few areas of red. If you're not sure, one of the things you can do is sort of experiment on a part of the page that doesn't have your drawing on it. So you can see on the left-hand side of this drawing here, I've made a bunch of scribble marks with my various pencils. Some of that is me just testing what the color actually looks like. They do try and make the outer part of the pencil look like the color that it is, but it often looks very different on paper. So sometimes I might see a pencil and go, oh, that's perfect. Draw on my little side page there and go, oh, that does not look like the color I thought it did. So you can test your colors there. But the other thing I'll do is I'll often layer pencils in that little scribble area. And you may want to have a bigger piece of scrap paper to do this on. And that way I can really start to, layer a few pencils on top of each other. If I'm not sure how I'm going to make a color in a drawing, it's much better for me to experiment not on my drawing than on the drawing itself, and then have a result that I'm not happy with. One of the colors you'll see me use, which you wouldn't necessarily expect in a yellow, orange, and red gemstone, is a green. And especially when I'm working on the middle part of the gem, which you'll see shortly, I use a fair bit of this green to get the tones that I want. And it's kind of a greenish brown, all in the middle of the gemstone there. And I wanted to talk about that just because oftentimes in a drawing there'll be a color or a pencil that you use that you wouldn't have expected. And as you progress as an artist, you'll get better and better at just looking at a drawing and going, oh, I know how I would do that. Yeah, I'll bring out my purple for this black dog. Most people wouldn't look at black fur and immediately go, I need to use purple. But until you get to that point where you can just kind of look at a drawing or look at a reference photo and go, okay, yeah, I know what pencils I can use. There's a few things you can do to help you out. One, as I said before, is experiment before you start drawing. And I've certainly done that before. When I was, in particular, one snake, I had no idea how to make the base color of the scales and was kind of stuck. And I just sort of experimented with a few different pencils until I hit upon a combination that works. The other thing I like to do, especially with fur, is using the eyedropper tool in Photoshop or another photo editing software. And the eyedropper tool is really nice because it will pick out the color of a certain pixel. And it really gives you a clear image of what colors make up that particular part. So you can, put the eyedropper tool and move it around certain areas, and you might see some blues or greens or reds that you wouldn't have normally thought were there. There are also pencil picker apps that I've just recently heard about where you can put a reference photo in and it'll tell you what combinations of pencils will work to produce that color. I haven't used one yet. Again, I have gotten to the point where for the most part, if I look at a drawing, with just my eyes, without a Photoshop tool or the color picker app, can sort of decide what I feel would produce that color the best. That being said, on complicated drawings or if the reference photo is blurry, I might still use the eyedropper tool just to give me a starting point from where I can build my colors. So I'm just gonna finish up this one sort of bottom section here. Again, you can see how dark I'm going with the browns, and I tend to go back over and darken things in the third layer. So this isn't quite as dark as the final picture will be, but I'm still going pretty dark because it's that really deep contrast that makes things stand out. So we're gonna leave this here for today because I can only upload videos in 15-minute chunks or less. And we'll come back for part 3, and you can see me finish up the last half of this drawing. Thanks for watching, and hopefully gave you some good tips.